Right now on Upfront.
A new year.
And the great thing is, we're going to win anyways.
Lawmakers returning to Madison, the state Supreme Court throwing out Wisconsin's legislative maps. Abortion, the state's elections, medical marijuana, all on the line. Our guest this Sunday to cover it all, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos.
Then countdown to another government shutdown.
One thing is absolutely clear. America is at a breaking point.
House Republicans traveling to the southern border. Border security negotiations intensifying in Washington. So you are open to some bipartisan discussions. We're one-on-one with Republican Congressman Brian Stile from Eagle Pass, Texas. And Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan is responding.
And January 6th, 3 years later, President Biden warning democracy is at stake.
Is democracy still America's sacred cause?
A week from the Iowa caucuses, former President Trump with a commanding lead. A retired Rear Admiral from the U.S. Navy in Wisconsin this weekend, speaking out, his warning moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. 2024 is off and running. The state Supreme Court ordering new legislative maps that have to be drawn in just weeks. Republicans now asking justices to reconsider.
All this as the 2024 election looms and major issues surrounding abortion, the state's election laws, and Republicans set to introduce a medical marijuana bill on Monday. Here to talk about it all, Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. Speaker, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year.
Good morning, guys. Happy to be here.
Let's start with the maps. There is a really tight timeline on this in terms of what needs to happen. You're asking the court to reconsider. If they don't, are you drawing new maps as we speak right now to submit to the court by Friday?
Well, let's first start up by saying nobody is surprised by what happened because we had a justice who predetermined the case before she even was put into office on the court. We also know that, what do they always say? When do you put out the worst possible news is on a Friday afternoon, and probably the worst possible news that you're embarrassed by on the Friday afternoon of Christmas weekend. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court did. So I think we all knew what was going to happen. It's disappointing, the timeline and the process that they've utilized, but we're going to try to meet what the court has said. I still believe in the Constitution. We still have to follow the rules that they set. So my first effort is, I read the decision. They said the legislature should try to draw maps. So my first effort is, we've already reached out to the Democrats. We believe that we should have the legislature be the ones have the first chance to draw a map, pass it through the process, hopefully get it signed by Governor Evers. The parties are going to also submit maps to the court, but they said that would be the remedial method if the legislature could not get maps drawn. So I'm an optimist. I think we should start by trying the legislature's method and then see what happens after that.
The governor told WisPolitics he's not going to submit the people's maps, which was his proposal.
I wonder why that would be.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because it's all a farce. I mean, we already know that they think that they have predetermined the case, that the justices are just going to do whatever the Democrats say. I have more faith in the process than it sounds like the Democrats do. You know, Tony Evers for years said he wanted a nonpartisan process. We gave it to him and he said he would veto the bill. He then put his own People's Maps Commission and said somehow this is the way that it should be done. He won't even submit the People's Maps Commission because he knows that the justices have predetermined the case. That is really a problem for everybody who cares about our republic and the independence of the judiciary. But that's why we're going to try our process to go through the legislature. And
any scenario where that works, the Republicans and the governor have an agreement?
I'm an optimist. I hope so. I mean,
realistically,
I think that would well, it's possible. I mean, we've already reached out to the minority Democrats because we want to try to do it together. So hopefully we have, good faith on both sides to say it's better for the legislature to do it than allow a bunch of experts from California.
You backed off of your threats of impeaching Justice Janet Protasewicz in this case. Why is that?
Well, number one, I really believe that it should not be something that occurs on a very regular basis. If you remember, the question was, will you impeach? And I said, we can't take it off the table. The Democrats then made a decision to run with it, to be able to fundraise off of it because they are so cynical. Everything they do is about raising money to try to use it to mischaracterize the positions of Republicans. I've never said we were going to impeach. All I have said from the very beginning is it's a tool the legislature has, and we have to know what it is. I asked justices to tell me under what circumstances could it ever be utilized. And they basically came back and said it really shouldn't be utilized unless somebody commits a crime. Well, she hasn't committed a crime. She's done things that are clearly wrong. I hope that other courts look at that and say what she's done is clearly outside the bounds of our norms in society, or it should be.
So impeaching Janet Protasewicz was never a reality in your mind?
Not really a reality, yeah.
the UW system just removed UW La Crosse's chancellor after it was discovered he was making pornographic videos with his
Pretty amazing
wife.
that you even have to say that, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty crazy.
What do you make of his argument of free speech and the First Amendment?
Well, it's different when you're a leader on campus. You are a thought leader. You're supposed to be somebody that's out raising resources, setting a standard. I don't think pornography is something that should be anywhere near the norm in our society. It's demeaning to women. It certainly does not help to have a stronger moral fiber in our society. So I don't think that we want to encourage our leaders to say, here's a side hustle where you can go and make porn videos and say that that's the norm. So I think they made the right decision, and I think you shouldn't be on campus any longer.
I want to ask about abortion. We know that there's still court action surrounding this, of course, but you want voters to kind of weigh in on this. You've suggested 12 to 14-week bans. The governor has said that he would veto that. Your caucus, do they still plan on moving forward with this?
That's our plan. We just talked about it again this week. So, look, there are certain topics that we have to figure a way in our society to get beyond. Now, there are lots of people who make money off of an argument, right? They grift on it. It's on both sides of the aisle. It's on all kinds of different issues. But I think that there are some things that we need to find a way to get to a middle ground and say not every Thanksgiving has to be arguing politics. Look, I'm pro-life. I strongly am. I have my entire life. I will be until I go into the grave. But I also think that we note right now, a Dane County judge has said that the law doesn't apply, so the law in Wisconsin is 20 weeks. That is way outside the international bounds. Take France as an example. They are a 14-week allowance for abortion. I think it's a reasonable position for us to say, if it's good enough for European countries to be at some kind of a middle standard, why could we not be closer to that? So 20 weeks now, my preference would be down to like 12 to 14 weeks, which is where most of them are. I think that still allows for the Democrats to say, hey, we still get to have abortion in the first trimester. I don't love that, but I think it's better than where we are right now, where it's almost all the way through the second and third trimester.
Even though the governor will veto this, do you have the votes in your caucus to pass this 12 to 14 weeks right now?
I feel pretty confident. I mean, we've had discussions about it. I think we'll put it on the floor, and I think it'll pass.
So not yet?
No, I think we do. I mean,
at this moment?
Yeah, we'll have to see. Yeah.
Let's talk about elections. Representative Krug told me recently he's still going to move forward with a bill that would eliminate the Wisconsin Elections Commission and give election authority to the Secretary of State, at least hold a hearing in the Elections Committee. The governor said he would veto that as well. Do you support this idea?
That is a stupid idea. If you look at what's happening in Maine right now, we have one Secretary of State who unilaterally decided that she was not going to put President Trump on the ballot, kind of taking democracy in her own hands. That is absolutely preposterous. It's why Sarah Godlewski pretending that she has something to do with elections is equally stupid. So I do not, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that we do not use the power that we have to give it to an elected official to make partisan mischief, which is exactly what's occurred in most states around the country. So that bill should die a long, slow death. It is dumb.
Your Republican colleagues are introducing it.
I understand. Doesn't mean that just because Republicans introduce it doesn't mean every idea is a good one. Look, there are problems with the Wisconsin Elections Commission, but we basically have three ways to run elections: a partisan elections official, which is like a Secretary of State, a partisan elections commission, or a nonpartisan elections commission. We have the best of the worst options, right? There are no good way to do it. Look, do I think Megan Wolf should go? I do. I think there are better people who could run elections than Megan Wolf, but I think that the structure of saying Republicans and Democrats should have to agree so that we have some kind of buy-in is a better process than saying we're going to trust one person to make all these decisions, especially when we see examples around the country where they are making really wrong-headed decisions. Look, Donald Trump deserves to be on the ballot. He should be on the ballot. I'm glad that in Wisconsin we didn't even have a lot of fight about it, right? It was that people should be on the ballot, let the voters decide. Letting one person make that decision, that would really be wrong for our state.
I want to ask about medical marijuana in Wisconsin. The governor told reporters this past week that he's open to signing medical marijuana legislation, even if it includes restrictions. How soon do you expect any legislation to be introduced?
I think you'll see next week that legislation gets introduced in the Capitol about medical marijuana. One of the biggest fears that I have, and I saw it in one of the comments that Governor Evers said, is that it's the first step toward recreational marijuana. That scares the bejesus out of most of the members of my caucus, because we know the wrong thing for Wisconsin is to legalize recreational marijuana. We have way too many drugs. We just went through a huge opioid crisis. The last thing that we need is marijuana shops on every street corner of every small town in Wisconsin, like we're seeing in Michigan and Illinois. They're not good. So If he wants to sign a limited version, I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to do that. But if it's just a precursor to get us toward recreational, it's going to kill the bill, and I hope that won't happen.
What type of restrictions do you anticipate to be in this bill?
You're going to see that we are offering a very limited version. It's going to help people who truly are sick. We are not going to have something like other states do where you can walk in and say, I don't feel well, and they give you a gummy bear, right? So it's going to be much more limited than that. It'll probably be the most restrictive version in the entire country, but one that we guarantee that only helps people who are truly sick and doesn't lead toward any kind of recreational marijuana.
Do you have the votes as we sit here today?
I don't know yet. We have talked about it half a dozen times in our caucus to try to make sure people are in the right place. I feel like we are very close, if not there, but I want to make sure people have a chance to read the bill, listen to their constituents, and understand it as we go through the public process.
Iowa caucus is about a week away, start of the primary season. You've said you won't vote for Trump in the primary. I'm curious who you're going to vote for.
I haven't made my mind up yet. I'm going to kind of see what happens in the first 5 or 6 primary states. If you remember last time around, I supported Marco Rubio. I think he would have been a better president in 2016, but he didn't make it even to Wisconsin. So I don't want to pick somebody early, and then by the time they get here, they've already dropped out.
If Trump is the nominee, as the polling indicates, will you attend the convention here in Milwaukee?
It's way too early to tell. I assume I will. I mean, you know, look, I voted for every Republican since I was able to cast my first ballot at 18. I can't imagine I wouldn't vote for the Republican. I just think if we look at the future of our country, having 2 people that nobody really wants as the nominees in a battle for the most important office on the face of the planet is a sad state of our democracy. I wish that the Democrats would find somebody better than Joe Biden. He's an embarrassment with the few times that he shows up to the White House to work. Donald Trump certainly is not the tone and the tenor that I want for the leader of the free world. But if that's the 2 choices, we'll have to make the best of the worst choices.
I mean, he tried to unseat you last cycle, and you're still considering voting for him.
Well, because it's not about the person. It really has to. I mean, that's how Donald Trump operates, right? It's about people and revenge. That's not right. Look, does Donald Trump have personality foibles that I certainly do not appreciate? Absolutely. And that's why I wish we had a better candidate to be the face of the Republican Party than Donald Trump. But if the choice is between an inept Joe Biden and Donald Trump, that's probably the only option that's left for a lot of Americans.
A short period of time in the end of this session of just a few weeks, a lot to get done. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, like I always say, we appreciate your time and
Thank you,
perspective.
gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Up next, lawmakers return to Washington this week with another government shutdown looming and a crisis on the southern border. Negotiations happening on Capitol Hill. Congressman Brian Stile and Mark Pocan standing by next.